The silence of the mansion was shattered by screams in the garden, but nothing could have prepared that father for what he was about to see. A thin, dirty, unknown girl was bravely defending his wheelchair-bound son from his own stepmother. By intervening, he not only saved the boy but also freed himself from a painful blindness. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The sweltering heat of a Boston summer afternoon hung heavy in the air as Maxwell Reed stepped out of his Tesla, loosening his silk tie with an exhausted sigh. The sprawling Victorian mansion before him, a testament to his business acumen, stood silent against the backdrop of perfectly manicured gardens. Today had been particularly trying. Another board meeting postponed, another acquisition delayed, but something unusual had prompted his early return home, a rarity in his relentless schedule. As he approached the wrought-iron gate that separated the driveway from the rear gardens, unfamiliar sounds pierced the typical afternoon quiet. Voices, arguing. His pace quickened instinctively. Maxwell paused behind a cluster of hydrangea bushes, the scene before him freezing him in place. His wife, Victoria, towered over his 12-year-old son, Ethan, who sat hunched in his wheelchair beneath the protective shade of an ancient oak tree. But what truly caught Maxwell's attention was the small figure standing defiantly between them. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, with tangled dark hair and clothes that hung in tatters from her thin frame. "Get away from him!" Victoria's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You filthy little street rat! How dare you trespass on our property?" The girl, though clearly terrified, stood her ground. "He needs to stay in the shade. His medicine makes him sick in the sun." "Don't tell me how to handle my stepson," Victoria snapped, her manicured hand reaching for Ethan's wheelchair. "He needs to toughen up, not hide in shadows like some pitiful invalid." Maxwell watched as Ethan tried to speak, his voice barely audible. "Please, I feel dizzy when—" "Enough!" Victoria cut him off. "This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything. Always with excuses, always hiding behind your condition." The little girl's hands balled into fists at her sides. Though clearly malnourished and dirty, something in her stance spoke of a strength that defied her size. "Leave him alone. He told you he's not feeling well." Victoria's face contorted with rage. She reached for the child, fingers curled like talons. "You little—" "Victoria!" Maxwell's voice thundered across the garden as he stepped from his hiding place. The tableau before him froze. Victoria's hand suspended in mid-air, Ethan's face brightening with relief, and the small girl shrinking behind the wheelchair. Victoria's complexion paled instantly. "Maxwell, darling, I didn't expect you home so early." Maxwell approached slowly, his gaze moving between the three figures. "Clearly not." His voice was measured, controlled, despite the anger building inside him. "What's happening here?" Victoria straightened her designer sundress, composure returning quickly. "I found this vagrant child trespassing. She somehow got past the security system and was bothering Ethan. I was simply removing her." Maxwell knelt beside his son's wheelchair. "Ethan, is that true?" The boy's eyes darted nervously between his father and stepmother before settling on the ground. "No," he whispered. "She's my friend. She helps me when—" His voice trailed off. "When what, son?" Ethan remained silent, but the little girl stepped forward cautiously. "When she pushes him into the sun and takes away his water," she said softly, eyes wide with fear, but voice surprisingly steady. "He gets sick from his medicine in the heat. I was just helping him stay in the shade." Maxwell felt something cold settle in his stomach. He turned to the small figure, noticing how she trembled despite her brave stance. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered, taking another tentative step back. "Well, Lily," Maxwell said, his voice gentling, "thank you for looking after my son." The girl's eyes widened in surprise, clearly having expected punishment rather than gratitude. Victoria made a sound of indignation behind them. "Maxwell, surely you're not entertaining this nonsense. This child is clearly lying, trying to manipulate." "Enough, Victoria." The steel in his voice silenced her instantly. "We'll discuss this inside." He turned back to Lily, who looked ready to bolt. "Please don't be afraid. Would you like to come inside for something to eat?" The mention of food made her eyes light up, though suspicion quickly followed. "I'm not supposed to go with strangers." Maxwell nodded seriously. That's very wise, but I'm Ethan's dad and he seems to know you well. Would that be okay? Ethan reached out and touched Lily's hand. It's okay, Lily, my dad's not like... He's nice. And Mrs. Patterson makes the best chocolate chip cookies. The mention of cookies seemed to tip the scales. Lily gave a small nod, though she remained close to Ethan's chair, as if ready to protect him if necessary. Inside the mansion, the contrast between Lily's appearance and the opulent surroundings couldn't have been more stark. Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper who had been with the family since before Ethan was born, gasped softly at the sight of the child, but quickly composed herself. With practiced efficiency, she prepared a bath and found some old clothes of Ethan's that might fit the girl, while Maxwell took his son aside. "How long has this been happening, Ethan?" he asked quietly once they were alone in the study. Ethan looked down at his hands. "Since Mum—" he paused, swallowing hard. "Since she went to heaven. Victoria changed after you two got married. When you're not home, she says I'm a burden." Maxwell felt as though he'd been struck. 3 years had passed since Catherine's passing from a long illness, and he'd remarried Victoria 18 months ago, believing his son needed a mother figure. He'd been so wrapped up in his grief and then his work, expanding his tech empire, launching new philanthropic initiatives, that he'd failed to see what was happening in his own home. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Ethan's eyes, so much like his mother's, looked up at him sadly. "You're never here, Dad. And when you are, you're always busy. Victoria said if I complained, I'd just be adding to your problems." Each word felt like another blow. Maxwell reached out and pulled his son into an embrace, feeling how thin he had become. How had he not noticed? "I'm so sorry, Ethan, so very sorry. But things are going to change, starting today." When Lily emerged from her bath, she was transformed. Her dark hair, now clean and combed, fell in soft waves around a face that, though still thin, revealed striking features. Mrs. Patterson had found her some clothes, a bit too large but clean and whole, and the child seemed both uncomfortable with the attention and relieved to be clean. Over dinner, with Victoria conspicuously absent, having been sent to cool down in the guest house, Maxwell gently encouraged Lily to share her story. Between mouthfuls of food that she ate as if each bite might be her last, her tale unfolded. She had been living on the streets for nearly 6 months, sleeping in cardboard boxes near the local farmers' market, where she could occasionally find discarded food. Her parents were gone. She didn't elaborate, and Maxwell didn't press. She'd noticed Ethan in his garden one day, watching him through the fence. "He seemed sad," she said, "always alone. Like me," she added simply. "So I thought maybe we could be not alone together." She had squeezed through a loose section of fencing at the far corner of the E. Property. Something Maxwell made a mental note to have fixed immediately, and struck up a friendship with Ethan. For weeks, they had met secretly whenever Victoria was occupied with her social engagements or spa appointments. "She helps me with my exercises," Ethan interjected, something like pride in his voice. "Lily can't do the fancy physical therapy stuff, but she pushes my chair around the garden paths so I can build up my arms. And she tells the best stories." Lily ducked her head, embarrassed by the praise. "I just make stuff up. About brave knights and dragons and stuff. And sometimes I pick flowers for him." She looked up suddenly, alarmed. "I didn't steal them. Only the ones that fell on the ground already, I promise." "It's quite all right," Maxwell assured her, something tightening in his chest at her fear of punishment for such a small act of kindness. As the evening progressed, the full picture became increasingly clear and increasingly disturbing. Victoria had indeed been neglecting Ethan, sometimes leaving him in the sun despite knowing his medication made him photosensitive, forgetting meals, and constantly belittling him for his disability. Lily, this tiny street child, had been the only one standing between his son and what could only be described as abuse. When Ethan finally tired, Mrs. Patterson took him up to bed with a tenderness that made Maxwell realize she must have been aware of at least some of what was happening. He made another mental note to speak with her privately. Left alone with Lily, who sat perched on the edge of a chair too large for her, Maxwell found himself at a loss. This child had nowhere to go, no one to care for her, and yet she had shown more compassion toward his son than the woman he had married. "Lily," he said finally, "would you like to stay here tonight?" We have many guest rooms, and tomorrow we can figure out what to do next." She looked at him with eyes too old for her young face. "Will your wife be mad?" "Don't worry about Victoria," he replied, a hardness entering his voice that made the child flinch slightly. Softening his tone, he added, "No one will hurt you here, Lily, you have my word." After Mrs. Gacy, Patterson had settled Lily in a guest room, the child's eyes wide with wonder at the size of the bed and the softness of the sheets. Maxwell steeled himself for the confrontation to come. It was time to face Victoria and the terrible mistake he had made in bringing her into their lives. Maxwell found Victoria in their bedroom, methodically packing an overnight bag as if preparing for a weekend getaway, rather than hiding from her husband's wrath. The click of her designer heels against the marble floor echoed in the cavernous master suite as she moved between closet and bed. "Going somewhere?" Maxwell leaned against the doorframe, his voice deceptively calm. Victoria barely glanced at him. "Just to the Four Seasons downtown. I assumed you'd need some time to get over your little tantrum in the garden." She folded a silk blouse with practiced precision. "Really, Maxwell? Making such a scene in front of the help? What would your board members say?" "I don't give a damn what anyone would say." Maxwell stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "What I care about is what's been happening to my son in my absence." Victoria sighed dramatically, finally turning to face him. In the soft lighting of their bedroom, she was still strikingly beautiful. The former model whose face had graced countless magazine covers before she'd set her sights on more permanent security. "You're overreacting. Ethan is spoiled. He uses that wheelchair as a crutch, and you know it." "A crutch?" Maxwell's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "He has muscular dystrophy, Victoria. It's a degenerative condition. The wheelchair isn't optional." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "The doctors said exercise would help slow the progression. I was merely encouraging him to be more active rather than wallowing in self-pity. By forcing him into the sun when you know his medication causes photosensitivity. By withholding water. That's not encouragement, Victoria. That's cruelty." Victoria's perfect features hardened. "And you're taking the word of some filthy street urchin over your wife's." "I'm taking my son's word," Maxwell replied, his voice dropping dangerously. "And Mrs. Patterson's, and yes, Lily's too. 3 separate accounts that all paint the same disturbing picture." A flash of something, fear perhaps, crossed Victoria's face before her expression smoothed into practiced indifference. "So now the help is conspiring against me with your precious son and his little vagrant friend." "How convenient. Why?" Maxwell asked, genuinely bewildered despite his anger. "Why would you treat him like this?" "He's just a child who lost his mother and needed compassion, not contempt." Victoria's mask slipped then, just for a moment. Her eyes, cold and calculating, met his. "Because I never wanted to be a stepmother, Maxwell. I wanted to be your wife, the wife of one of Boston's most eligible billionaires. The child was baggage I was willing to tolerate for the lifestyle, not some project I signed up to nurture." The raw honesty of her statement struck him like a physical blow. "You married me for my money," she laughed, the sound brittle in the opulent room. "Don't act surprised. You married me for my beauty and the perfect picture we made for your investors and society pages. We both got what we wanted." She zipped her overnight bag with finality. "Or at least we did until you decided to play the devoted father." Maxwell felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that comes with absolute certainty. "I want you out of this house by morning, permanently." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "I'm your wife. I'm entitled to—" "You signed a prenuptial agreement, if you recall. Infidelity or abuse of any family member constitutes grounds for termination of all financial benefits beyond the initial settlement." Maxwell's voice was ice. "You'll get what we agreed upon, nothing more, nothing less. My lawyers will be in touch." "You can't possibly believe you'll win this," Victoria hissed, abandoning all pretense of composure. "It's my word against a crippled boy and a homeless brat. I'll take you for everything you're worth." Maxwell crossed to the nightstand and picked up a small device the size of a cufflink. "Our security system records everything, Victoria, including the gardens. I installed it after the corporate espionage attempt last year." He watched realization dawn on her face. "Every incident Ethan and Lily described is documented. Every word you just said has been recorded." The color drained from Victoria's perfect features. "You wouldn't dare release those recordings. Think of the scandal, the damage to your company's stock price. I don't need to release anything publicly, just to my legal team and if necessary to a family court judge. Maxwell moved to the door. Your things will be packed and delivered to wherever you choose. But you will never set foot in this house again, and you will never come near my son. Victoria stared at him, calculation replacing shock as she processed her options. Finally, she grabbed her bag. You'll regret this, Maxwell. You and your broken little family. The only thing I regret, he said quietly as she brushed past him, is every day I was away, leaving my son in your care. The slam of the front door echoed through the mansion minutes later, followed by the roar of Victoria's Porsche speeding down the driveway. Maxwell stood at the window of his study, watching the taillights disappear through the gates, feeling not loss but liberation and overwhelming guilt for what his neglect had allowed to happen. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Mr. Reed? Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway, her weathered face somber in the lamplight. I've settled the young miss in the blue guest room. Poor thing fell asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. Maxwell gestured for her to enter. Mrs. Patterson, we've known each other for 15 years, since before Ethan was born. Why didn't you tell me what was happening? The housekeeper's eyes filled with tears. I tried, sir. I left messages with your assistant. Sent emails marked urgent. But Miss Victoria, she monitored your communications. Said it was to protect you from trivial household matters during your important business dealings. Another failure, another way he had let his son down. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. I should have been more attentive. Yes, you should have, Mrs. Patterson agreed, her blunt honesty one of the reasons Catherine had hired her all those years ago. But what matters now is what you're going to do about it. Victoria won't be returning, Maxwell said firmly. And from now on, my priority is Ethan. I'll be working from home as much as possible, and I'll need your help rearranging my schedule. And the little girl. Lily? Maxwell hesitated. I don't know yet. She can't go back to the streets, that's certain. Tomorrow I'll contact social services, see what options. If I may, sir, Mrs. Patterson interrupted, uncharacteristically bold. That child protected your son when no one else could. The system failed her once already. Do you really want to throw her back into it? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Before Maxwell could formulate a response, another small voice joined their conversation. Mr. Reed. Lily stood in the doorway, drowning in borrowed pajamas, her clean hair forming a dark halo around her face. I heard a loud noise. Is Ethan okay? The immediate concern for his son rather than for herself struck Maxwell profoundly. Ethan is fine, Lily. He's sleeping. What are you doing up? She shuffled her bare feet against the carpet. The bed is too soft. I'm not used to it. Mrs. Patterson made a small sound of distress. Would you like me to make it firmer for you, dear? Lily shook her head. No, thank you. I just wanted to check on Ethan. The loud noise sounded angry. That was just my wife leaving, Maxwell explained gently. She won't be coming back. Understanding bloomed in the child's two wise eyes. Because of what I said? About how she treats Ethan? Because of what she did, Maxwell corrected. I did nothing wrong, Lily. In fact, you did everything right. You protected someone who needed help, even though you needed help yourself. Lily considered this, her small face solemn in the dim light. What happens to me now? Do I have to go back? The question, so simple and yet so profound, tore at Maxwell's heart. No, he found himself saying, the decision crystallizing even as the word left his mouth. Not if you don't want to. Mrs. Patterson raised an eyebrow but said nothing, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Can I stay with Ethan? Lily asked, hope and wariness warring in her expression. I promised him I'd help with his exercises tomorrow, and he was going to teach me chess. We'll figure everything out tomorrow, Maxwell promised. For tonight, try to get some sleep. And Lily, thank you for being my son's friend when he needed one most. The smile that bloomed across her face transformed her from a wary street child into simply a little girl, one who, for perhaps the first time in months, felt safe. After Mrs. Patterson had led Lily back to bed, Maxwell found himself drawn to his son's room. He eased the door open quietly, slipping inside to stand beside the bed where Ethan slept peacefully, his breathing deep and even. In sleep, the worry lines that had no place on a 12-year-old's face smoothed away. Maxwell gently brushed a strand of hair, Catherine's hair, the same warm brown, from his son's forehead, and was struck by how much he'd missed, how much he'd failed to see. Since Catherine's passing, he had thrown himself into work, using 60-hour weeks and constant travel as shields against his grief. He had outsourced his parenting to a woman who saw his child as an inconvenience. He had abandoned the one person who mattered most, the living legacy of the woman he had loved. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to his sleeping son, "but I promise things will be different now." As if in response, Ethan shifted slightly, murmuring something incomprehensible before settling again. Maxwell stood watching him for a long time, his mind racing with plans and possibilities, with hopes for redemption and second chances. Down the hall in the blue guest room, a little girl who had survived against impossible odds slept in a real bed for the first time in months, and somewhere on the other side of Boston, a woman who had married for money rather than love was realizing that her carefully constructed future had just collapsed. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the first hint of pink touched the eastern sky, Maxwell Reed made a vow to himself, to his son, and to the brave little girl who had shown him what truly mattered. From this day forward, he would be the father his son deserved, the protector they both needed, and perhaps in time, a family reborn from the ashes of what was lost. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Reed mansion, casting long golden rectangles across the breakfast table. For the first time in years, Maxwell sat unhurried over his coffee, his laptop closed and phone silenced. Across from him, Ethan carefully cut into his pancakes, occasionally glancing toward the doorway. "She'll be down soon," Maxwell assured him, recognizing his son's anxiety. Mrs. Patterson said Lily was having a bit of trouble adjusting to the bathroom. Apparently she was overwhelmed by the number of faucets. Ethan nodded, relaxing slightly. "The rain shower scared me too when we first moved here." The casual reference to their move from their more modest Cambridge home to this Beacon Hill mansion, a purchase Maxwell had made after his startup's IPO, reminded him how much had changed in their lives. Not all of it for the better, he now realized. As if summoned by their conversation, Lily appeared in the doorway, hovering uncertainly at the threshold. Her hair was damp from the shower, and she wore clothes that Mrs. Patterson must have found in storage, a simple t-shirt and leggings that had once belonged to a younger Ethan, both still too large for her thin frame. "Good morning, Lily," Maxwell said warmly. "Are you hungry?" The girl nodded, her eyes widening at the spread on the table. Pancakes, fresh fruit, yogurt, and a pitcher of orange juice. She approached cautiously and climbed into the chair beside Ethan, who immediately pushed the syrup toward her. "Mrs. Patterson makes the best pancakes," he informed her solemnly. "Way better than the fancy chef Victoria hired." Maxwell watched as Lily carefully served herself a single pancake, then hesitated, clearly uncertain about how much was acceptable to take. "Please help yourself to as much as you'd like," he encouraged. "There's plenty more in the kitchen." The permission was all she needed. Soon Lily was devouring her breakfast with the focused intensity of someone unaccustomed to regular meals. Between bites, she and Ethan fell into an easy conversation that spoke of a friendship deeper than Maxwell had initially realized. They had shared stories, secrets, even developed their own jokes. His son had found in this unexpected friend what he had been missing: unconditional acceptance. After breakfast, Maxwell faced the practicalities of their situation. He made several phone calls from his study, first to his assistant, cancelling his meetings for the week, then to his lawyer, initiating divorce proceedings, finally to a social worker he knew through one of his philanthropic foundations. Sarah Jenkins arrived at the mansion just before lunch, her practical navy suit and sensible shoes at odds with the opulence surrounding her. Her kind eyes took in the mansion's grandeur with professional detachment before settling on the girl sitting nervously beside Ethan in the sitting room. "Hello, Lily," she said gently, sitting across from them. "My name is Sarah. I'm here to help figure out what happens next for you." Maxwell observed from the doorway as Sarah skillfully engaged Lily in conversation, drawing out her story piece by painful piece. The picture that emerged was heartbreaking. Parents lost to addiction, a foster placement that had ended in neglect, and months of survival on Boston's streets before finding Ethan. "You've been very brave," Sarah told her, after Lily had finished speaking. And very resourceful. Not many children could have managed as well as you did. Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what I had to do. Well, now we need to figure out the best place for you going forward, Sarah continued, glancing at Maxwell. Somewhere safe with people who will take good care of you. She could stay here, Ethan blurted out, his hand finding Lily's. Right, Dad? She could stay with us. The hope in his son's eyes was mirrored in Lily's, though hers was tempered with the wariness of a child who had learned not to expect too much from adults. Maxwell stepped fully into the room, his decision already made. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with Ms. Jenkins, he said, joining them. I'd like to apply for emergency foster placement for Lily, with the intention of adopting her permanently if she would like that. Sarah's professional mask slipped momentarily, surprise evident in her expression, before she composed herself. Mr. Reed, while I appreciate your intentions, fostering and especially adoption are not decisions to be made lightly. There are home studies, background checks, training requirements, all of which I'm prepared to complete, Maxwell interrupted firmly. But in the meantime, Lily needs a safe place to stay. Given what she's been through, wouldn't it be better for her to remain in an environment where she's already formed a bond, rather than placing her with strangers? Sarah studied him carefully. Your wife is no longer in the picture, Maxwell said, his tone brooking no argument. The divorce proceedings began this morning. I see. Sarah made a note in her file. And your work schedule? Caring for 2 children, one with special needs, requires significant time and commitment. I'm restructuring my role at Reed Technologies, Maxwell explained. I've been working remotely more since the pandemic anyway, and my COO is more than capable of handling day-to-day operations while I focus on my family. Sarah turned to Lily, who had been following the conversation with intense focus. Lily, how would you feel about staying here with Mr. Reed and Ethan, at least for now? Lily glanced between Ethan and Maxwell, hope warring with caution in her expression. Would I have to leave if I did something wrong? The question cut through the room like a knife. Maxwell knelt beside her chair, meeting her eyes. No, Lily, this would be your home. Families don't send people away when they make mistakes. My last foster mom did, she whispered. Well, I'm not her, Maxwell said gently, and I promise you, no matter what happens, you will always have a place here if you want it. Something in his voice or expression must have convinced her, because Lily nodded slowly. I'd like to stay, she said quietly. With Ethan and with you, Mr. Reed. I think we can arrange that, Sarah said, a small smile playing at her lips. At least provisionally, while we work through the proper channels. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of paperwork and planning. Sarah helped Maxwell fill out emergency foster placement forms, scheduled a home study for the following week, and arranged for Lily's medical examination, a requirement before placement could be finalized. She'll need clothes, school supplies, probably therapy, Sarah advised as she prepared to leave. And patience, Mr. Reed, lots of patience. Children who've experienced trauma don't heal overnight. I understand, Maxwell assured her, walking her to the door. And thank you for making this happen so quickly. Sarah paused on the threshold. I'm making an exception because of the circumstances and your resources, she said frankly, but mostly because in 20 years of social work, I've learned to recognize when a child has found where they belong. She glanced back toward the sitting room, where Ethan was showing Lily how to set up a chessboard. Don't make me regret it. I won't, Maxwell promised. After Sarah left, Maxwell found Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen preparing dinner. We'll need to set up a proper bedroom for Lily, he told her. Something more permanent than the guest room. The housekeeper nodded approvingly. The blue room adjoining Master Ethan's suite would be perfect. They share the connecting balcony, but each has their privacy. I took the liberty of ordering some basics for the young miss this morning. Clothes, toiletries, a few books. They should arrive tomorrow. Maxwell smiled gratefully. What would we do without you, Mrs. Patterson? Starve, most likely, she replied dryly, returning to her cooking. And, Mr. Reed, it's good to see you home before dark. The house has missed you. The simple statement carried more weight than any reprimand could have. Maxwell nodded, accepting both the observation and the forgiveness it contained. That evening, the three of them ate dinner together in the formal dining room that had rarely seen use since Catherine's passing. Maxwell found himself captivated by the easy interaction between Ethan and Lily, The inside jokes, the genuine care, the way his son seemed more animated than he had in years. "Dad, can we show Lily the game room after dinner?" Ethan asked, his eyes bright with excitement. I told her about the virtual reality setup. "Of course," Maxwell agreed, "though perhaps we should start with something a bit less overwhelming. Maybe board games." Lily, who had been quietly savoring her roast chicken as if it were a rare delicacy, looked up. "I don't know how to play many games," she admitted. "Just chess a little." "Ethan started teaching me." "Well, we have plenty to choose from," Maxwell assured her, "and plenty of time to learn." After dinner, they retreated to the family room, another space that had gathered dust in recent years. While Ethan and Lily explored the cabinet of board games, Maxwell found himself drawn to the baby grand piano in the corner. Catherine had played almost every evening, filling the house with Chopin and Debussy until her illness had robbed her of the strength in her hands. Without conscious thought, he sat at the bench and lifted the cover, running his fingers lightly over the keys. The first notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence as muscle memory returned. He became aware of silence behind him and turned to find both children watching, Ethan with tears in his eyes and Lily with wonder on her face. "Mom used to play that," Ethan said softly. Maxwell nodded, his own throat tight. "She taught me, though I was never as good as she was." "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, approaching the piano cautiously. "Can you teach me someday?" "If you'd like," Maxwell replied, touched by her request. "Your hands are still small, but we could start with simple pieces." Ethan wheeled closer. "Mom always said music heals the soul," he told Lily solemnly. "When I was little and scared, she would play until I fell asleep." Maxwell watched as his son shared this precious memory with his new friend, realizing that this was what healing looked like, not forgetting the past but weaving it into a new future. For the first time since Catherine's loss, the house felt like a home again, vibrating with possibility rather than echoing with absence. Later, after both children were settled in their beds, Ethan in his room and Lily in the blue guest room that would soon be permanently hers, Maxwell stood on the balcony outside his bedroom, staring up at the stars barely visible through Boston's light pollution. "I wish you could see them, Kath," he murmured to the night sky. "Our son, finding his courage, this remarkable little girl who protected him when I failed to. I think you would approve." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the oak tree below, and Maxwell chose to take it as a sign. Tomorrow would bring challenges, Victoria's inevitable legal maneuvers, the complexities of the foster and adoption processes, the adjustments all three of them would need to make to their new reality. But for tonight, under the same stars that had witnessed both his greatest joy and deepest sorrow, Maxwell Reed felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. 3 weeks passed with the speed of a summer storm. The blue guest room transformed into Lily's sanctuary, walls painted a soft lavender at her shy request, bookshelves filling with volumes at a rate that reflected her voracious appetite for stories, and a window seat cushioned with pillows where she often sat watching the gardens below. The child who had once slept in cardboard boxes now had a canopy bed, though Mrs. Patterson confided to Maxwell that Lily still sometimes curled up on the floor, old habits proving difficult to break. The legal process moved forward with the efficiency money could buy. Victoria, recognizing the strength of Maxwell's position, had negotiated a quiet settlement rather than risk the public revelation of her behavior. She departed for Europe with her initial settlement payment, her social media already showcasing a new wealthy companion. Maxwell felt nothing but relief at her absence. Ethan flourished under his father's renewed attention and Lily's companionship. His physical therapist remarked on his improved strength, attributing it to the daily adventure walks where Lily pushed his wheelchair through the gardens, inventing elaborate stories about the plants and insects they encountered. But not everything was smooth sailing. The peaceful breakfast routine they had established was shattered one Tuesday morning by the shrill ring of the doorbell, followed by Mrs. Patterson's worried face appearing at the dining room entrance. "Mr. Reed," she said, her usual composure noticeably strained, "there's a Miss Eleanor Blackwood at the door. She says she's Lily's aunt." The fork in Lily's hand clattered to the plate. Her face, which had begun to show healthy color in recent weeks, drained white. Ethan immediately reached for her hand. "It's okay," he whispered fiercely. "Dad won't let anything happen to you." Maxwell set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Lily, do you know this person?" The girl shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't have any aunts, at least none that ever wanted me." "Stay here with Ethan and Mrs. Patterson," Maxwell instructed, rising from his chair. "I'll handle this." In the grand foyer, a woman in her late 30s waited, designer handbag clutched in manicured hands, her sharp eyes taking inventory of the mansion's valuable art and antiques. Something about her calculating gaze reminded Maxwell uncomfortably of Victoria. "Miss Blackwood." Maxwell extended his hand professionally. "I'm Maxwell Reed. I understand you're claiming to be related to Lily." The woman's handshake was brief but firm. "Eleanor Blackwood. I'm Lily's maternal aunt. I've been searching for her for months, ever since my sister and her husband passed away." She barely hesitated over the euphemism. "Imagine my surprise when I see in the society pages that some tech billionaire is fostering my niece." Maxwell's instincts, honed through years of business negotiations, sensed the falsehood beneath her polished veneer. "Interesting. The Social Services Department has been unable to locate any living relatives." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Bureaucratic incompetence. I've been traveling extensively for work. I'm in pharmaceuticals and only recently returned to the States. Naturally, I came as soon as I heard." "Naturally," Maxwell echoed, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "And what exactly are your intentions regarding Lily?" Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "She's my blood, Mr. Reed. I've come to take her home, of course." A cold anger settled in Maxwell's chest. "I see. And where was this familial concern when Lily was sleeping in cardboard boxes and eating from dumpsters?" The woman's composure faltered momentarily. "As I said, I was abroad. Had I known—" "Miss Blackwood," Maxwell interrupted, "forgive my directness, but Lily has no recollection of you. She states she has no aunts who ever showed interest in her welfare. Moreover, her caseworker has thoroughly investigated her family background and found no surviving relatives willing or able to care for her." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Children often don't understand adult matters, and caseworkers make mistakes. I have documentation proving my relationship." She reached into her bag, producing a folder. "Birth certificates, family photos. I'm her closest living relative and I have legal standing." Maxwell accepted the folder but didn't open it. "I'll have my legal team review these. In the meantime, I'm afraid I can't allow you to see Lily until we've verified your claims and consulted with social services." "You can't keep me from my niece," Eleanor snapped, the pleasant facade cracking. "I have rights." "And Lily has been through enough trauma," Maxwell countered firmly. "If you are who you claim to be, you'll understand my caution. If your concern is genuine, you'll want what's best for her, which means not disrupting the stability she's finally found until we sort this out properly." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, calculation evident in her expression. "I understand you're a very wealthy man, Mr. Reed. Perhaps we could discuss your arrangements. Raising a child is expensive." After all, and there it was, the true purpose of her visit, laid bare in a moment of opportunistic greed. Maxwell felt a surge of disgust. "My security team will see you out, Miss Blackwood," he said coldly. "Any further communication should go through my attorneys, and if I discover these documents are fraudulent, which I strongly suspect they are, I will pursue legal action." The threat hung in the air between them. Eleanor clutched her bag tighter, her smile now brittle. "This isn't over." "For your sake, I hope it is," Maxwell replied, signaling to the security guard who had discreetly appeared in the hallway. "Jason will escort you to your car." After she left, Maxwell immediately called Sarah Jenkins, explaining the situation, while his security team ran a background check on Eleanor Blackwood. By lunch, his suspicions were confirmed. The woman was a known scam artist, with a history of targeting wealthy families, particularly those in the adoption process. The documents she'd provided were skilled forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. The crisis averted, Maxwell returned to the dining room to find Lily huddled in Mrs. Patterson's embrace, Ethan holding her hand and speaking in low, reassuring tones. "She's gone," Maxwell announced gently, "and she won't be coming back. She wasn't really your aunt, Lily, just someone trying to take advantage of the situation." "To get money?" Lily asked perceptively, her voice small but steady. Maxwell nodded. once again struck by how quickly she grasped the darker aspects of adult behavior, a knowledge no child should have to possess. "So I can stay?" The hope in her question broke his heart. "Yes," Maxwell assured her, kneeling beside her chair. "You can stay for as long as you want to. In fact," he pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket. Sarah had delivered it yesterday, but he'd been waiting for the right moment. Now seemed perfect. "These are your official foster placement papers. You are officially legally part of this household now. And if everything continues to go well, in about 6 months we can start the adoption process, if that's what you want." Lily stared at the papers, then at Maxwell, her expression a complex mix of hope and disbelief. "You want to adopt me? To be my dad?" "I would be honored," Maxwell said simply, "but only if you want that too." Lily looked at Ethan, who was nodding enthusiastically, then back to Maxwell. "I've never had a real dad before," she whispered. "My father, he wasn't good at it." "Well, I'm still learning," Maxwell admitted, "but I promise to do my best every day." A tear slipped down Lily's cheek, the first Maxwell had seen from her despite everything she'd been through. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I'd like that," she said finally, "to be part of your family." "For real? Then it's settled," Maxwell declared, his own throat tight with emotion. "Now how about we do something fun today? I believe I promised someone a trip to the aquarium." The rest of the day passed in a blur of colorful fish, fascinating exhibits, and the sound of children's laughter, a sound Maxwell had almost forgotten. Watching Ethan and Lily press their faces against the glass of the penguin habitat, pointing and giggling together, he felt a completeness he had been missing for years. But that night, long after both children had fallen asleep, Maxwell sat in his study, reviewing the security footage from Eleanor Blackwood's visit. Something about the incident bothered him, not just the attempted scam which his team had handled efficiently, but the timing of it. How had she known about Lily's placement with his family so quickly? The society pages had indeed mentioned it, but only in a small item buried in the weekend edition. He picked up the phone and called his head of security. "Kevin, I need you to dig deeper on Eleanor Blackwood. Specifically, I want to know if she has any connection to Victoria." The following morning, his suspicions were confirmed. Eleanor Blackwood had been Victoria's college roommate at Vassar. The scam attempt hadn't been random opportunism. It had been a calculated first strike in what Maxwell now recognized would be Victoria's campaign of revenge. As he prepared to join the children for breakfast, his phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Court filing came in. VS contesting divorce settlement. Claiming emotional distress and defamation. Wants triple the agreed amount plus public apology. Maxwell set the phone down, unsurprised. Victoria had always been strategic, always playing the long game. This was just her opening move. The sound of laughter drifted from the dining room, Ethan apparently telling Lily about the time he'd accidentally set off the mansion's sprinkler system during an overly enthusiastic science experiment. Maxwell paused in the doorway, watching them. Ethan was gesturing animatedly, his face more expressive and alive than it had been in years. Lily was giggling, her guard completely down in a way Maxwell had rarely seen. In that moment, he made a silent vow. Nothing, not Victoria, not false relatives, not anything, would threaten the fragile happiness these children had found. Whatever battles lay ahead, he would face them. Whatever it took to protect this newfound family, he would do it. "Dad," Ethan called, spotting him. "Come tell Lily about the time Mom filled your office with balloons for your birthday." Maxwell joined them at the table, pushing aside thoughts of legal battles and revenge schemes. "Well," he began, smiling at the memory, "your mother had a unique approach to celebrations." As he recounted the story of Catherine's elaborate practical jokes, watching both children laugh at the image of a Fortune 500 CEO wading through thousands of balloons to reach his desk, Maxwell felt Catherine's presence more strongly than he had in years. She would have loved Lily instantly, would have recognized the same courage and compassion in the girl that had drawn him to Catherine all those years ago. "She sounds amazing," Lily said softly when the story concluded. "Ethan's mom, I mean." "She was," Maxwell agreed, "and she would have been so proud of both of you." Later, as they prepared for their day, Ethan had physical therapy, and Lily was scheduled for an educational assessment. To determine the best school placement for fall, Maxwell noticed Lily lingering by Catherine's photograph in the hallway. She was beautiful, Lily observed. Ethan has her smile. Yes, he does, Maxwell agreed, his heart warming at the child's perception. Lily hesitated, then looked up at him with those two wise eyes. That lady yesterday, the fake aunt, she wasn't the end of it, was she? Bad things are still coming. The question caught Maxwell off guard. How much should he share with this child, who had already endured more than her fair share of life's cruelties? In the end, honesty seemed the only respectful choice. There might be some difficulties ahead, he acknowledged, but nothing for you to worry about. My job is to handle the adult problems. Your job is just to be a kid, to learn and play and grow. Lily considered this seriously. I haven't been very good at being a kid, she admitted, but I think I'd like to try. Well, Maxwell said, gently steering her toward the kitchen where Ethan was waiting. You've got plenty of time to practice. Autumn painted Boston in fiery hues as summer relinquished its hold on the city. The Reed Mansion's gardens transformed, oak leaves turning golden before drifting to the ground, where Ethan and Lily collected the most perfect specimens for their growing science project. Inside, change continued its steady march as well. Lily had begun attending the same private school as Ethan, an institution renowned for its inclusive approach to education and exceptional services for students with disabilities. Initially placed 2 grades below her age level due to educational gaps, Lily's voracious appetite for learning had already prompted discussions of acceleration. Her teachers marveled at her mathematical intuition and the speed with which she absorbed new information once given the opportunity. The adoption process progressed, with the final hearing scheduled for December, a Christmas gift as Maxwell had framed it to both children. Lily's nightmares, once a nightly occurrence, had decreased to occasional episodes, usually triggered by thunderstorms or unexpected noises that harkened back to her time on the streets. But as the Reed household settled into its new normal, the storm Maxwell had anticipated finally broke upon them with the force of a New England nor'easter. It began with a call from Ethan's school, just after lunch on a Tuesday in mid-October. Mr. Reed, the principal's voice conveyed carefully controlled alarm. There's been an incident involving Ethan and Lily. They're both fine, she added quickly. But we need you to come to the school immediately. Maxwell was in his home office, video conferencing with his executive team when the call came through. Without hesitation, he ended the meeting mid-presentation. Family emergency, was all he said before signing off, already reaching for his car keys. At Westbrook Academy, he found both children in the principal's office, Ethan in his wheelchair, looking simultaneously furious and frightened. Lily beside him, her face set in the closed, wary expression Maxwell hadn't seen in weeks. The principal, Dr. Hammond, rose as he entered, her usual warm demeanor replaced by professional concern. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming so quickly. Please have a seat. What happened? Maxwell asked, moving to stand between the children, a hand on each of their shoulders. Dr. Hammond exchanged a glance with the school counselor seated in the corner before responding. During lunch period, a reporter somehow gained access to school grounds. She approached Ethan and Lily, began asking them questions and taking photographs. Our security intercepted her within minutes, but not before she upset the children. Questions about what? Maxwell asked, though he already suspected the answer. It was Ethan who responded, his voice trembling with anger. She asked if Lily was the street urchin that broke up your marriage. She asked if it was true that you were only adopting her for publicity, for your company's new poverty initiative. She called Lily a... He broke off, too upset to continue. She called me a charity case, Lily finished quietly, and asked if I felt guilty for ruining your family. White-hot rage flashed through Maxwell, followed quickly by the cold clarity of protective fury. Where is this person now? Our security escorted her off campus, Dr. Hammond replied. The police have been notified, as this constitutes trespassing and harassment of minors. We've also contacted our attorneys. I want her name, the publication she works for, and copies of any photographs or recordings she made, Maxwell said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. My legal team will handle this from here. Dr. Hammond nodded, sliding a folder across her desk. We anticipated that. This contains her press credentials, which security confiscated, and statements from the staff members who witnessed the incident. Maxwell accepted the folder, then knelt between the children. I am so sorry this happened to both of you. Lily, none of what this person said is true. Not one word. The girl nodded, but her eyes remained downcast, the protective shell she had developed on the streets visibly reforming around her. Can we go home now? Ethan asked, reaching for Lily's hand. I don't want to stay here today. Maxwell looked to Dr. Hammond, who nodded her permission. Of course. Let's go home. The drive back to the mansion passed in uncomfortable silence. In the rearview mirror, Maxwell could see Ethan whispering reassurances to Lily, who sat unnaturally still, staring out the window. His heart ached for both of them, children who had already endured so much, now subjected to the cruel machinations of adults who should know better. At home, Mrs. Patterson took one look at their faces and immediately set about preparing hot chocolate, her universal remedy for distress. Maxwell called his head of security and legal team from his study, setting in motion the responses needed to contain the situation. When he returned to the kitchen, he found both children huddled at the counter, hands wrapped around steaming mugs. I've spoken with our lawyers, he told them, taking the seat beside Lily. They're going to make sure those pictures never get published, and that reporter is going to be in serious trouble for what she did. It won't stop with her, Lily said softly, her insight once again catching Maxwell off guard. Will it? He hesitated, torn between protecting her from harsh realities and respecting her intelligence. No, he admitted finally. I'm afraid it might not. It's Victoria, isn't it? Ethan asked bitterly. She's doing this because she's mad you're divorcing her. Maxwell sighed. I believe she may be involved, yes? The divorce has become contentious. That was an understatement. Victoria had escalated from contesting the settlement to a full-blown media campaign, portraying herself as the victim of a callous husband who had cast her aside for PR opportunities. So far, most reputable outlets had been skeptical of her claims, but the tabloids had begun to run with the story, emboldened by the sensationalism of the wealthy tech mogul, the disabled son, and the homeless girl he had taken in. Is she trying to stop my adoption? Lily asked, cutting straight to her greatest fear. No, sweetheart, Maxwell assured her quickly. She has no legal standing to interfere with that process. The adoption is proceeding exactly as planned. But she's trying to hurt us anyway, Ethan concluded, his young face hardening with an understanding beyond his years. Maxwell couldn't deny it. Some people, when they're hurt or angry, try to make others feel the same way. It's not right, but it happens. I know, Lily said simply, and Maxwell was reminded again of just how much this child had seen of humanity's darker nature. That evening, after both children had finally fallen asleep, Lily in Ethan's room, as neither had wanted to be alone, Maxwell met with his crisis management team in the library. The situation was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Victoria had given an exclusive interview to a notorious gossip site, painting herself as the devoted stepmother, cast aside when Maxwell had become obsessed with his savior complex regarding Lily. The adoption hearing is vulnerable, his lead attorney, David Cohen, warned. Not legally. Victoria has no standing to challenge it, but in terms of public perception, if she creates enough noise, it could influence the judge's decision regarding Lily's best interests. What do you recommend? Maxwell asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Counter-narrative, suggested Melissa Wu, the PR specialist he had reluctantly brought onto the team. Not attacking Victoria, that would backfire, but controlling the story about Lily. A carefully managed interview, perhaps. Show how she's thriving, how this is genuinely about providing a loving home, not publicity. Maxwell shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. I won't subject Lily to more public scrutiny, or use her as a pawn in this game. She's a child, not a prop. Then what about you? Melissa pressed. A father-focused piece. Your journey from grieving widower to dedicated father of two. Frame it as a story of healing and redemption, not charity. The discussion continued late into the night, strategies proposed and rejected. Contingencies planned for every scenario Victoria might orchestrate. By the time his team departed, Maxwell felt emotionally drained but resolved. He would protect his children, whatever the cost to his privacy or public image. He was heading upstairs when a small voice stopped him. "Mr. Reed?" Lily stood on the landing in her pajamas, her dark hair tousled from sleep, her eyes alert despite the late hour. "Lily? What are you doing up, sweetheart?" Maxwell climbed the remaining stairs to join her. "I heard voices," she explained. "Is everything okay?" Maxwell hesitated. "Everything will be fine," he said finally. "There are just some grown-up problems we're working on." Lily studied his face with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through adult evasions. "Because of me?" "No," Maxwell said firmly, leading her back toward her bedroom. "Because of choices other people are making." "None of this is your fault, Lily." She allowed herself to be tucked back into bed, but caught his hand as he turned to leave. "I could go," she whispered. "If I'm causing problems for you and Ethan, I could go back—" "Stop right there," Maxwell interrupted, sitting on the edge of her bed. "You are not causing problems. You are not going anywhere. You are exactly where you belong, here with us." "But that lady at school said—" "That lady was wrong," Maxwell said firmly, "and cruel. And she's going to face consequences for what she did." He gently brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "Do you remember what we talked about, when Eleanor Blackwood showed up pretending to be your aunt?" Lily nodded. "You said your job is to handle the adult problems, and my job is to be a kid." "That's right. And I meant it. I don't want you worrying about this, Lily. I promise you nothing and no one is going to prevent you from becoming part of this family officially. Not Victoria, not reporters, not anyone." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, seeming to accept his determination as fact. "Okay, good. Now try to get some sleep. And remember, if you have bad dreams, Mrs. Patterson and I are right down the hall, and Ethan is just next door." As Maxwell left her room, closing the door softly behind him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Victoria's vengeful campaign was merely the first test of many his unconventional family would face. He needed to be prepared, not just to fight the immediate battle, but to equip his children with the strength and resilience they would need for the challenges ahead. The following morning, Maxwell made two important calls. The first was to his company's board of directors, informing them of his decision to step down as CEO and transition to the role of executive chairman, a position that would allow him the flexibility his family needed while maintaining strategic oversight of the company he had built. The second was to Sarah Jenkins, Lily's social worker, requesting an urgent meeting to discuss how best to shield both children from the media storm Victoria was brewing. Sarah arrived that afternoon, concern evident in her expression as she settled into a chair in Maxwell's study. "I've been following the situation," she said without preamble. "It's unfortunate but not entirely unexpected. High-profile adoptions often attract this kind of attention. How do I protect them?" Maxwell asked, dispensing with pleasantries. "Especially Lily, she's already been through so much." Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. "Legally, we're on solid ground. The home study is complete, the background checks are clear, and Lily's placement with you has been demonstrably beneficial to her well-being. No judge is going to be swayed by tabloid gossip, but," Maxwell prompted, sensing the unspoken reservation. "But children are perceptive," Sarah continued. "They absorb the emotional atmosphere around them. If this situation escalates, if you become increasingly stressed or angry, they'll feel it, even if you think you're hiding it well." Maxwell nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "So what do you suggest?" "Transparency, to a degree appropriate for their ages. Reassurance without false promises. And most importantly, maintaining their routine and sense of security." Sarah leaned forward. "And take care of yourself, Mr. Reed. These children need you strong and present." After Sarah left, Maxwell found himself drawn to the garden, where Ethan and Lily were collecting fallen leaves with Mrs. Patterson's help. Watching them laugh together, engaged in the simple joy of childhood despite the morning's disruption, he felt a surge of protective determination. Victoria might have money, media connections, and a vendetta, but Maxwell had something far more powerful, the truth of what this family meant to each other. No amount of tabloid speculation or vindictive lies could change that reality. As if sensing his presence, both children looked up. Ethan waved enthusiastically, and Lily, after a moment's hesitation, smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her solemn face and kindled a matching warmth in Maxwell's chest. "Dad," Ethan called. "Come see what we found. It's a caterpillar that looks exactly like your eyebrows when you're concentrating." Maxwell laughed, the sound surprising him with its ease, and joined his children in the dappled autumn sunlight. The storm was coming, perhaps was already upon them, but in this moment, with leaves crunching beneath his feet and children's laughter in his ears, Maxwell Reed felt equal to whatever challenges lay ahead. November arrived with biting winds and the first dusting of snow across Boston's historic streets. Inside the Reed mansion, preparations for Thanksgiving were underway, the first real family holiday they would celebrate together. Mrs. Patterson had been planning the menu for weeks, consulting with both children about their favorite dishes. For Ethan, this meant his mother's traditional cranberry orange relish. For Lily, who had never experienced a proper Thanksgiving, everything was new and fascinating. The media frenzy Victoria had initiated had intensified before burning itself out when a more scandalous celebrity divorce captured the tabloids' attention. Maxwell's legal team had successfully obtained injunctions against the most egregious publications, and his decision to step back from day-to-day operations at Reed Technologies had been framed as a family-focused choice that impressed industry observers. The school had implemented enhanced security measures, and the reporter who had accosted the children had been fired after Maxwell's lawyers presented evidence of her illegal trespassing and harassment of minors. Victoria herself had retreated to Monaco with her latest companion, apparently recognizing that her campaign was yielding diminishing returns. The divorce proceedings continued, but the immediate threat to the family's peace had subsided, or so Maxwell thought, until the morning his private investigator called. "Mr. Reed," the investigator's voice was professionally neutral. "I've completed the background review on Miss Peterson. You should come to my office to discuss the findings." Maxwell had hired the investigator weeks ago, not out of distrust of Lily's social worker, but as a precautionary measure to ensure Victoria couldn't manufacture connections or plant false evidence to derail the adoption. Standard procedure, his legal team had called it. Now, the gravity in the investigator's tone suggested something significant had been uncovered. "Can you give me a summary?" Maxwell asked, glancing at his watch. He was supposed to take Ethan to physical therapy in an hour. "Sir, I really think this is better discussed in person." Something in the man's voice raised Maxwell's hackles. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. After arranging for Mrs. Patterson to handle Ethan's appointment, Maxwell drove to the nondescript office building in Cambridge, where Marcus Daniels, former FBI agent and now private investigator, maintained his practice. The man's expression as Maxwell entered his office confirmed this wasn't a routine briefing. "What did you find?" Maxwell asked without preamble, declining the offered seat. Daniels slid a folder across his desk. "It's about Lily, sir. Her background isn't what we thought." Maxwell's heart clenched. "Explain." According to official records, Lily Wilson was orphaned when her parents died in a car accident 6 months ago. She was briefly placed in foster care but ran away after allegations of neglect were filed against the foster parents. Daniels tapped the folder. "That's the story social services has, the story Ms. Jenkins has been working with." "But," Maxwell prompted, tension building in his chest. "But it's fabricated," Daniels said flatly. "The accident report exists, but the victims weren't Lily's parents. The foster placement records were created after the fact, backdated in the system. Someone constructed this identity for her approximately 3 months ago." Maxwell felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath him. That's impossible. "Who would do that? Why?" "That's where it gets interesting," Daniels continued, opening the folder to reveal photographs. "These are from traffic cameras near your estate, taken the week before you first encountered Lily. This woman," he pointed to a tall, elegant figure in dark clothing, "appears multiple times, always with Lily. She drops her off near your property, appears to be giving her instructions. The next day, same thing." Maxwell stared at the grainy images, recognition dawning with horrifying clarity. "That's Victoria," Daniels nodded grimly. "Yes, and there's more." He slid another document forward, a bank statement showing a substantial transfer from one of Victoria's personal accounts to an offshore entity. This payment was made to a consulting firm in the Cayman Islands the day after Lily first appeared in your garden with Ethan. The implications crashed over Maxwell like a tidal wave. She planted Lily. The whole thing was a setup. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow with shock. It appears so, Daniels confirmed. Though I haven't determined the full scope yet. Was the girl a willing participant? How did Victoria find her? What was the end game? These questions remain unanswered. Maxwell's mind raced through the possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Had Lily been acting the entire time? Was her apparent bond with Ethan fabricated? Was everything, her background, her personality, her vulnerability, a calculated performance orchestrated by Victoria? No, that couldn't be right. Maxwell had seen Lily's fear, her nightmares, her gradual blossoming as she began to feel safe. No child could fake that level of trauma and recovery. But clearly, something about her story wasn't what it seemed. I need to speak with Lily, Maxwell said decisively, and my legal team. Keep digging, Marcus. I need to know everything. Who this child really is, how Victoria found her, what her ultimate plan was. Sir, Daniels hesitated, this could potentially impact the adoption proceedings. If Lily's identity is fraudulent, I'm aware of the implications, Maxwell cut him off. But there's a child involved here, whatever the circumstances. I won't make any decisions until I have the complete picture. The drive home passed in a blur, Maxwell's mind churning with questions and theories. Victoria had never shown interest in children, had actively resented Ethan. Why go to such elaborate lengths involving a child in her schemes? What could she possibly hope to gain? As he pulled into the mansion's driveway, a chilling thought struck him. What if Victoria's plan hadn't been to end their marriage, but to destroy it from within? To plant a child who would create division, expose Maxwell's neglect of Ethan, perhaps even threaten the boy's inheritance. If so, her plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of driving father and son apart, Lily had brought them closer than ever. Inside, he found Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen, preparing afternoon snacks. "Where are the children?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the storm raging inside him. "In the garden room, sir. Ethan's physical therapy went very well today. The doctor says his upper body strength has improved significantly." Maxwell nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. "I need to speak with Lily alone. Could you keep Ethan occupied for a while?" Mrs. Patterson's shrewd gaze assessed him. "Is everything all right, Mr. Reed?" "I'm not certain," he answered honestly, "but I intend to find out." In the garden room, a glass-enclosed space filled with plants that Catherine had designed as a winter sanctuary, Ethan sat in his wheelchair with a book open on his lap, reading aloud while Lily curled in a wicker chair beside him, her eyes closed as she listened to the story. The scene was so peaceful, so natural, that Maxwell hesitated in the doorway, doubt creeping in. Could this truly be part of an elaborate deception? Ethan spotted him first. "Dad, you're back early. I did 15 minutes on the parallel bars today." "That's fantastic, son," Maxwell managed to smile. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you did great at therapy." Lily's eyes had opened at Ethan's exclamation. She studied Maxwell's face with that unnerving perception that had always seemed beyond her years. Something in his expression must have alerted her, because her posture subtly changed, shoulders tensing, body angling slightly away, the unconscious, defensive posture of a child expecting bad news. "Ethan, Mrs. Patterson has snacks ready in the kitchen," Maxwell said, maintaining a casual tone. "Why don't you go ahead? I need to talk to Lily for a few minutes." Ethan glanced between them, sensing the undercurrent. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing for you to worry about," Maxwell assured him. "Just some adoption paperwork questions." Still looking suspicious, Ethan nevertheless wheeled himself toward the door, pausing briefly beside Lily. "I'll save you some cookies," he promised before leaving. When they were alone, Maxwell took the seat Ethan had vacated, angling it to face Lily directly. The girl sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes watchful. It was the same posture she'd adopted during their first conversation 3 months ago, wary, prepared for rejection, braced for the worst. "Lily," Maxwell began, struggling to find the right words, "I need to ask you something important, and I need you to tell me the truth. No matter what that truth is, I promise I won't be angry. But I need honesty." She nodded, her face carefully blank. Okay. How did you really come to be in our garden that first day? The day I found you defending Ethan from Victoria? The question clearly wasn't what she'd expected. Confusion flickered across her features. I told you. I saw Ethan through the fence and thought he looked lonely, so I squeezed through the loose part and made friends with him. And before that, Maxwell pressed gently. Where were you living? Who was taking care of you? Lily's eyes dropped to her hands. Nobody. I was on my own. Lily. Maxwell leaned forward, keeping his voice gentle but firm. I know that's not the whole story. I have photographs of you with Victoria, before you supposedly met Ethan. She brought you to our neighborhood, didn't she? The color drained from the child's face. Her hands began to tremble, and for a terrible moment Maxwell thought she might bolt from the room. But then she looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. Are you sending me away now? She whispered. The naked fear in her voice shattered any remaining doubt in Maxwell's mind. Whatever Victoria's scheme had been, Lily had been a pawn, not a willing participant. No, Lily, I just need to understand what happened. Please tell me the truth. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The lady, Victoria. She found me at the shelter downtown. I really was alone. My mom... Lily swallowed hard. My mom had problems. Drugs. She left me at a gas station about a year ago and never came back. I was in foster homes, but they were bad, so I ran away. I was at the shelter when Victoria came. Maxwell felt a cold rage building toward his soon-to-be ex-wife, but kept his expression neutral. What did Victoria tell you? She said she knew a boy who needed a friend. A boy in a wheelchair whose dad was never home and whose mom was mean to him. She said if I could make friends with him and make him happy, she'd give me a home and new clothes and I'd never have to go back to the shelter. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. She told me what to say about finding him through the fence, and she showed me where the loose part was. Did she tell you to protect him from her, to stand up to her that day? Lily shook her head, a tear spilling down her cheek. No, that was real. She was being mean to him, making him go in the sun when he said it hurt. I couldn't let her do that, even if it meant she wouldn't help me anymore. Relief washed through Maxwell. The moment that had most touched him, Lily's brave defense of Ethan, had been genuine, not staged. What else did Victoria tell you to do or say? He asked. Nothing specific after that first day. She just said to be his friend and make him happy. Lily looked up, desperation in her eyes. And I did. I really did become his friend. I didn't pretend that part. Ethan is the best person I've ever met, and I'd never do anything to hurt him. Please believe me. I do, Maxwell assured her, beginning to understand. Victoria's plan became clearer. She had found a genuinely homeless child and placed her in Ethan's path, gambling that Maxwell's guilt over his neglect of his son would lead him to take in the girl who had befriended him. But to what end? Perhaps she had intended to discover Lily's presence, expose Maxwell's gullibility, and use it to gain leverage in their marriage or eventual divorce. She couldn't have anticipated that Lily would stand up to her, that Maxwell would witness it, or that the bond between the children would become so genuine. Am I in trouble? Lily asked, wiping away tears. Are you going to tell Ethan I lied to him? You didn't lie about the important things, Maxwell said. Your friendship with Ethan is real. Your need for a home was real. Victoria manipulated you, Lily. She used you as part of a plan to hurt our family, but you ended up bringing us closer together instead. I don't understand, Lily admitted. Neither do I fully, Maxwell acknowledged. But I do know this. You belong here with us regardless of how you came to be here. The adoption will proceed as planned. Hope dawned tentatively on Lily's face. Really? Even though I didn't tell the whole truth? You were a scared child doing what an adult told you to do, Maxwell said firmly. The blame lies with Victoria, not with you. Lily sat silently for a moment, processing his words. Then she asked the question that had clearly been haunting her since he began. Does Ethan have to know? Maxwell considered carefully. His son's trust had been violated enough by the adults in his life. Learning that his friendship with Lily had begun as part of Victoria's manipulation might damage that precious bond. And yet, secrets had a way of eventually surfacing, often causing more harm in their concealment than their revelation. I think, he said slowly, that someday, when you're both older, the truth will need to be shared. But not right now. Right now, what matters is that you and Ethan have a real friendship, and we're building a real family. The how of it is less important than the what of it. Relief flooded Lily's face. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, hesitantly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you had known from the beginning that Victoria brought me here, would you still have let me stay?" The question gave Maxwell pause. Would he have seen past the deception to the child herself? Or would suspicion and anger have blinded him to what truly mattered? "I'd like to think so," he answered honestly. "But what's important is that I know now and you're still here. That's not going to change." The tension gradually eased from Lily's small frame. She looked up at him with those solemn eyes that had seen too much of life's harshness. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything before." "I understand why you didn't," Maxwell assured her. "Now why don't you go join Ethan for snacks? I need to make a few calls, but we'll talk more later if you have questions." After Lily left, moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying a fragile burden, Maxwell remained in the garden room, surrounded by the plants Catherine had loved. He thought of his late wife, wondering what she would make of this tangle Victoria had created. Catherine, with her unfailing moral compass and compassionate heart, would have seen straight to the core truth. Regardless of how Lily had entered their lives, she belonged with them now. Maxwell picked up his phone and called his investigator. "Marcus, I need you to find Lily's real mother, and I want everything you can get on her time in the foster system. Names, records, everything. Victoria didn't create Lily's trauma. She exploited it. I need to know exactly what that child has been through." His next call was to his attorney. "David, we need to revisit the divorce settlement. Victoria crossed a line I can't overlook. She used a vulnerable child as a pawn in whatever game she was playing." He paused, anger giving way to determination. "And I want to accelerate the adoption process. Whatever needs to happen, make it happen. I don't want any more delays." As the afternoon light filtered through the glass ceiling of the garden room, casting dappled shadows across the floor, Maxwell Reed made a decision. Victoria's scheme, whatever its original intent, had brought Lily into their lives. And in doing so, it had given them all a second chance at family, at healing. He wouldn't allow her manipulations to taint that gift. In the kitchen, he found Ethan and Lily sharing cookies and laughing over a joke in one of their books. Ethan looked up as Maxwell entered, his expression immediately concerned. "Is everything okay with the adoption stuff?" he asked, ever perceptive. Maxwell smiled, the weight of revelation settling into a kind of peace. "Yes, everything's fine. In fact, I just asked our lawyer to see if we can move things along faster." Ethan's face brightened. "So Lily will officially be my sister sooner?" "That's the plan," Maxwell confirmed, watching as Lily's cautious smile bloomed into something more genuine. "Now who's going to help me decide what movie to watch tonight?" "I believe it's family movie night." As the children eagerly began debating the merits of various films, Maxwell observed the easy interaction between them. The casual way Ethan reached for Lily's hand when excited, the attentive manner in which Lily adjusted his wheelchair without being asked. These weren't the actions of a child following a script or fulfilling an assignment. This was genuine connection, genuine care. Victoria had planted a seed intended to bear bitter fruit. Instead, it had grown into something beautiful and unexpected, and Maxwell would ensure it continued to flourish, protected from the shadows of its origins. Snow fell in gentle swirls outside the courthouse windows, dusting Boston in a pristine white blanket that transformed the city into a scene from a holiday card. Inside courtroom 306, Maxwell adjusted his tie for the third time, glancing at his watch. The adoption hearing was scheduled to begin in 10 minutes, and his usual composure had abandoned him entirely. Beside him, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, dressed in his first proper suit, navy blue with a red tie that matched the ribbon securing Lily's carefully braided hair. The girl herself perched on the bench next to them, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her emerald green dress, her face a study in contained emotion. The past 6 weeks since Maxwell's discovery of Victoria's scheme had been a whirlwind of activity. His investigator had located Lily's mother, currently in a rehabilitation facility in New Hampshire, having surrendered her parental rights during a moment of clarity about her inability to care for her daughter. The official termination of rights had cleared the final legal hurdle for the adoption, though the revelation of Victoria's manipulation had briefly complicated matters. In the end, Maxwell's legal team had presented the judge with the complete truth. Yes, Victoria had orchestrated Lily's initial presence at the Reed estate, but everything that followed, the genuine bond between the children, Maxwell's commitment to providing Lily with a loving home, was authentic and in the child's best interests. The family court judge, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years' experience, had reviewed the evidence and declared she had seen enough genuine families formed from unusual beginnings to recognize the real thing. "Are you nervous?" Maxwell asked Lily softly, noticing how she repeatedly touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Ethan, who had insisted on using his own allowance money to buy his soon-to-be sister a family welcome present. Lily nodded, then seemed to reconsider. "Not scared nervous, more like waiting for Christmas nervous." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "Fear's better than Christmas. Christmas comes every year, but you only get officially adopted once." The wisdom in his statement struck Maxwell anew. His son had grown so much in these months, not just physically, as his dedicated physical therapy began to yield results, but emotionally. The lonely, withdrawn boy who had suffered under Victoria's neglect had blossomed into a confident young man who understood the value of family beyond blood ties. Reed family? The bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "Judge Williams is ready for you now." As they entered the courtroom, Maxwell was struck by how different this felt from the corporate acquisitions and mergers he had overseen throughout his career. This wasn't a business transaction, though the legal paperwork might seem similar. This was the formal recognition of a bond that had already formed, a family that had already claimed each other. The proceedings moved with surprising swiftness. Judge Williams, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes behind no-nonsense glasses, reviewed the file one final time before addressing them directly. "Lily," she said, her tone gentle but not condescending, "I've read all about your journey to the Reed family. It's been an unusual path, hasn't it?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor. And I understand that Mr. Reed has explained to you the full circumstances of how you first came to his home?" Another nod. 2 weeks after his discovery, Maxwell had carefully shared a simplified version of the truth with both children together. Ethan's initial anger at Victoria had quickly given way to fierce protectiveness toward Lily, declaring that, "It doesn't matter why you came, only that you stayed." "I've been doing this job for a long time," Judge Williams continued, "and I've learned that families come together in all sorts of ways. What matters isn't how they start, but how they grow together." She smiled. "And from everything I can see, you three have grown into a real family." She turned to Maxwell. "Mr. Reed, by signing these papers, you are legally accepting the responsibilities of parenthood for Lily Wilson, who will become Lily Reed. You are committing to provide for her physical, emotional, educational, and spiritual needs until she reaches adulthood, and indeed beyond. Are you prepared to make this commitment?" "I am, Your Honor," Maxwell replied, his voice steady despite the emotion tightening his throat. "With all my heart." "And Ethan," the judge addressed his son directly, "as Lily's new brother, you also have an important role in this family. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Ethan sat up straighter in his wheelchair. "I've been ready since the day she stood up for me in the garden," he answered with a conviction that belied his 12 years. Judge Williams smiled. "Well then, I see no reason to delay." She signed the papers before her with a flourish, then stamped them officially. "By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I hereby declare this adoption complete and recognize Lily Wilson Reed as the legal daughter of Maxwell Reed, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities therein." She handed Maxwell a certificate. "Congratulations to the Reed family." For a moment no one moved, the weight of the moment holding them in place. Then Lily turned to Maxwell, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Is it really done? Am I really your daughter now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Maxwell confirmed, his own voice rough with emotion. "Officially and forever." What happened next caught him completely by surprise. Lily, who had always been careful about physical contact, a child who approached hugs with caution, born of too many disappointments, launched herself into his arms. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for wanting me." Maxwell held her close, his vision blurring. "No, Lily, thank you for saving us." Ethan wheeled closer and Maxwell extended one arm to include him in the embrace. For a long moment, they remained there in the courtroom, a tableau of family forged through adversity and bound by choice rather than merely blood. The celebration lunch afterward at Lily's favorite restaurant, a quirky diner where the pancakes were served all day, was a joyous affair. Mrs. Patterson joined them, along with Sarah Jenkins, whose initial skepticism about the unusual placement had transformed into wholehearted support. "I have something for both of you," Maxwell announced as they finished their meal. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced 2 small velvet boxes. "These are family traditions." To Ethan, he handed the box containing his grandfather's pocket watch, a Reed family heirloom passed from father to son for generations. "Your mother and I always planned to give you this on your 12th birthday, but with everything that happened, well, today seemed like the perfect occasion." Ethan opened the box reverently, eyes widening at the gleaming gold timepiece inside. "It's beautiful, Dad. I'll take good care of it, I promise." "I know you will, son." To Lily, Maxwell presented the second box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket shaped like a heart. "This belonged to my grandmother, and then to my mother. Catherine wore it on special occasions." He helped Lily open the tiny clasp to reveal 2 miniature photographs already placed inside, one of Ethan and one of Maxwell himself. "There's room for more as our family continues to grow and change." Lily stared at the locket, then at Maxwell, her expression one of awe. "This was your mom's." "And Ethan's mom's?" "Yes, and now it's yours to pass down someday if you choose." "Family traditions," Lily whispered, touching the locket reverently. "I've never had those before." "Well, you do now," Ethan declared confidently. "Lots of them. Wait until Christmas. Dad goes crazy with the decorations. And we always make snow angels on the first big snowfall, and have movie nights every Friday. And we'll make new traditions together," Maxwell added, watching Lily's face light up with each description of family life. As winter settled over Boston, the Reed household transformed. The mansion, once a showpiece of wealth but emotionally barren, became a genuine home. Rooms previously preserved like museum exhibits were rearranged for comfort and function. The formal dining room now hosted not only meals but homework sessions, art projects, and family game nights. The garden room bloomed with new plants selected by the children to honor Catherine's memory. Maxwell's transition to executive chairman at Reed Technologies proved surprisingly smooth. Working primarily from his home office, he found himself more productive and focused, no longer driven by the need to escape his grief through endless work. Being present for his children, attending Ethan's physical therapy sessions, helping Lily prepare for her accelerated placement exams, simply being available when they needed him, fulfilled him in ways corporate success never had. Victoria made one final attempt at disruption, leaking the story of Lily's planted arrival to a gossip columnist. The article appeared briefly before Maxwell's legal team had it retracted, but the damage was minimal. The Reed family's genuine connection was by then so evident that even the most cynical observers recognized Victoria's claims for what they were: the bitter accusations of a woman whose manipulations had backfired spectacularly. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks before Christmas. Victoria accepted a settlement significantly reduced from the original agreement, her leverage destroyed by evidence of her scheme involving Lily. She departed for Europe permanently, a footnote in the Reed family story rather than the antagonist she had attempted to be. On Christmas Eve, snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, coating the gardens in pristine white. Inside, the mansion glowed with warmth and light. A massive fir tree dominated the main living room, decorated with a chaotic mix of elegant heirloom ornaments and handmade creations the children had produced in a week-long crafting frenzy. After dinner, as they gathered in the living room for their new tradition of exchanging one gift on Christmas Eve, Maxwell found himself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. From the broken, disconnected family they had been to the unit they had become, it seemed almost miraculous. "Dad," Ethan's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Lily and I made something for you. We wanted to give it to you tonight." Maxwell accepted the carefully wrapped package, noting the meticulous creases in the paper, Lily's handiwork, no doubt. Inside, he found a handcrafted photo album, its cover decorated with pressed flowers from Catherine's garden. "Open it," Lily urged, uncharacteristically impatient. The first page held a photograph of Catherine holding infant Ethan, her face radiant with new motherhood. Subsequent pages chronicled Ethan's early years, then jumped to recent months: Lily's arrival, their first trip to the aquarium, Thanksgiving dinner, the adoption day. The final pages were blank, waiting for future memories. "Mrs. Patterson helped us find the old pictures," Ethan explained, "and we took the new ones with that camera you got me for my birthday. It's our whole family," Lily added softly. "Past and present and future." Maxwell traced the images with gentle fingers, emotion tightening his throat. "It's perfect," he managed finally. "The best gift I could imagine." Later, after the children had gone to bed vibrating with Christmas anticipation, Maxwell stood in the doorway of Lily's room, watching her sleep. In slumber, the wariness that sometimes still shadowed her features melted away, leaving only the face of a child, his child, now in name as well as heart. Next door, Ethan slept soundly, his grandfather's pocket watch carefully placed on his nightstand. Maxwell adjusted his son's blankets, brushing the hair from his forehead in a gesture that had become ritual. In his own room, Maxwell found himself drawn to the window overlooking the gardens where this unlikely journey had begun. 6 months ago, he had been a grieving widower lost in work, a father present in name but absent in practice, a husband to a woman who saw marriage as a business arrangement. Now he stood transformed, reconnected to his son, father to a daughter who had taught him as much as he had taught her, builder of a family forged through adversity rather than convention. Victoria's scheme, designed to manipulate and wound, had instead become the catalyst for healing. The girl she had placed in their path as a pawn had become the cornerstone of their redemption. In trying to destroy what was broken, she had inadvertently created the opportunity to rebuild something stronger, truer, and infinitely more precious. A soft knock at his door pulled Maxwell from his reflection. Mrs. Patterson stood there, a gentle smile on her face.